humans, it's just Martine, and today we're going to be reading a rainbow. I have a rainbow stack picked out here. The orange is not coming across on camera, but this is orange. So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo question mark, and violet. I tried my best, but we're going to be reading these 7 books to read a whole rainbow. Reading rainbow. Let's do it. Okay. My red book is now red. Technically the cover does not have much red, but the spine is red, and what was most important to me when I was creating my stack is that the stack itself was rainbow, so I'm counting this as my red book, and if you have a problem with that, don't. This is a debut police procedural that felt like a sequel. The detective in this was just returning from like medical leave from something that happened on a previous case, which I feel like happens a lot in later books in procedural series. So that was a little weird, and at first I was like, oh, is this a second book? Like I didn't know that going in. And then like everywhere on this it says debut, and it's actually the first in a series. So that was weird. And it did make sense eventually why it was set up like that, but I still felt like it gave it a weird vibe. Anyway, I'm giving this 3.5 stars. In it, we follow an Irish detective as there's like a slew of mysterious deaths happening around, which sounds like every other book ever, but I promise it's slightly different. It was a pretty good time though. I felt like the ending was a bit rushed. I felt like the crimes themselves were interesting, and after you've read a certain number of like crime fiction books, that in and of itself is like a mark of an interesting book for the crime to be different from what you've read about before. So I appreciated that. At least there were some messages people might get out of this book about people's different preferences that I don't think is the right message to get out of it, and I don't think anything was done to counteract the idea that people might get that message. I'm not going to be more specific than that. Look up triggers for this if you're interested in reading it, but the way that things were done, yes, it was bad and criminal, but it was never acknowledged that like there are things that are not inherently bad or criminal that then when taken too far are. It was just overall seen as like this is a bad thing when that's not the case. Anyway, red. Okay, so the next color was orange, and for that I read Little Bee by Chris Cleave, which I'm giving 5 stars. I loved this book. During the couple of days that I was reading it, I just wanted to be reading this all the time instead of any of the other books I was reading. The synopsis of this book is very vague, but it's vague for a reason, because as it says, the magic is in how the story unfolds, because it's a very, at first glance, basic premise where 2 women's lives intersect at like a critical moment, but like really it's so much more than that. So we're following 2 characters in this. One is a mom who lives in England, and one is an immigrant called Little Bee from Nigeria, and she goes to England, and things kind of unfold from there. And I really don't want to tell you anything else about this book except that it has like great discussions on grief, humanity, and like also obviously good discussions about immigration and asylum seekers and all that stuff, because truly the magic of this is finding out along the way and learning about these characters and their relationship to one another and the ways that their stories have interacted and continue to interact and intersect. I don't know, I just thought this was so good, which is crazy because when I think what color book am I going to love, I typically don't think orange. That's what happens when you read a rainbow. Some colors surprise you. I just finished my yellow book, which was The Ensemble, and I loved it. I'm giving it 5 stars. This is exactly the type of like beautiful character-driven book I'm usually looking for when I say I like character-driven works. Like I don't care if it's slow, I don't care if not much happens. This book is what I mean by that. In this one, we're following the 4 members of a string quartet. They're basically ending their time in conservatory. They're graduating and they want to go pro with their quartet. They're like tensions and different relationships and dynamics within the quartet, and so we're following them as a group across the years, and it was just so good. And there were also song titles before the different parts that told you what they were playing within that section of the book, and so you could listen along, and that was really fun too. I'm trying to find a good example of it. Where did they go? These were the songs they were playing in the concert that happened in this first part, and it was so fascinating to read the descriptions of them playing a certain song and then listen to the song and like match it up with the words, because clearly the author tried really hard to stay true to the music and describe different things that happen in the different songs and how the characters dealt with those moments, and that was just so incredible. And I also loved the like descriptions of what playing music feels like Like, there was one concert where things didn't go quite right, and it felt exactly how I feel every time I end up performing on stage, which was so crazy. And I cared about the characters so deeply, and them as a group even more. And I was rooting for all of them and worried about them the whole time. And it was just so beautifully written. And like, this People magazine review says pitch perfect, and I have to agree, because it felt like a well-constructed song. There were major chords, there were minor chords, there was dissonance, there was harmony, there were themes. It was so good. I don't know, it just read so well, especially since I've spent so much of my life making music, and like, both my parents have degrees in music. Music has always been a large part of my life, and I even played violin for several years in middle school, and so it was just interesting reliving that through this, but obviously at such a different scale because they were professional musicians, and it was just so good. Like, I can't say enough good things about it. I loved every second that I was reading this book. And there was even one part that was talking about the experience of reading a book and how there will be a sentence that's like good on its own and great within the context of the book. And like, so many of the sentences in this fit that. And so I was just thinking that the whole time. It was incredible. Loved it. My green book was The Tenant, which is a mystery thriller set in Copenhagen, a police procedural type thing. In it, we're following this police detective. He's had kind of a rough go of it recently, going through a divorce, not doing so well. And his first big case back on the job after a bit of a hiatus is this case of this young woman who was found killed in her apartment building. She is a tenant. And so in this whole thing, we're trying to figure out what happened to her and trying to avoid a rising body count as a serial killer takes over in Copenhagen. I'm giving this 3.5 stars. Overall, it was really enjoyable, and for a police procedural, I really liked it. There were some parts that felt like they were written by a man, which is weird because this book was not written by a man. It would just be like a sentence or two here or there, and I would like roll my eyes and be like, this is contributing nothing to the story. It's not interesting. I don't like it. Get rid of it. Why is it there? And it was either forced there by an editor or should have been forced out by an editor, you know, like either way. But the rest of it was really enjoyable. I liked the cast of detective characters that we had, especially the partnership between the two lead detectives on the case. Typically, you have a very buddy-buddy situation, but in this one, the two detectives lead very different lives and kind of don't fully agree on everything, which I really appreciated. I thought the like crimes themselves were pretty interesting and unique for a mystery thriller, so I appreciated that. The whodunit of it all was quite satisfying to me. I enjoyed this one overall. For my blue book, I read Habeas Corpus, and I'm giving it 4 stars. Listen, is this high art? No. Is this a darn good time? Yes. I'll give you the basic, like, synopsis, what is this book about, and then I'll tell you why I think it was fun for me specifically. So in this one, we're following this lawyer. He manages to witness this event where people are trying to set these dolphins free. This one, like, I'm not sure you'd call it a sanctuary place. Anyway, it's just a place where they have dolphins. And so there's like this bust where people are trying to set them free. And so that lawyer ends up representing a person who was part of that bust because one of the other people gets killed. And so there's a felony murder charge put on this defendant. And then we're also following this other lawyer, and typically she works with this defense lawyer in his firm, and they're a couple, but she's drafted in to get prosecutorial power over this case because the regular prosecutor has a conflict of interest because it's his like nephew. They're actually competing against each other in court. One's on prosecution, one's on defense. So it gets crazy. And we're just following the story of like what happened to these dolphins and why, and going to see like what happens between these two people in this relationship who go to court against one another. And this was so fun. It's so silly. Like, there were parts of it that were like legally accurate, like the discussion of the felony murder charge. I really appreciated. To be totally fair, this author was a trial lawyer, and so like he does have legal experience, which I appreciated, and that made the legal parts fun, and the discussions of like different types of lawyers was interesting. But I think the most fun part was 2 things. One, the nephew, not the nephew who's being charged with felony murder, but the nephew of the main lawyer. He was such a fun character. Like, he was obsessed with dolphins and he wanted to learn to understand them. So he was like recording all their like clicks and whistles and learning how to talk to them. It was super cute. You couldn't describe him. He was so wholesome and funny and like great. And then also this book takes place in Florida, and it mentions so many places in Florida that I know. And so it was just really fun to make references to those places. For instance, like they referenced some of the like college football rivalries. People outside of Florida probably don't care about that, but I thought it was so fun and funny, like for them to say, oh, the judge presiding over this case was an alumnus of the University of Florida, so we're going to dress in orange and blue. It was just like, it was silly stuff like that. And they were talking about places they knew and stuff. And I think that just made this so fun. So I'm giving this 4 stars. I just had a really fun time reading this. And listen, the pun name got me. That's why I grabbed this to begin with. This was a good time. And it also kind of fits in my like whale era of reading with the sea creatures. So it's like doubly awesome. It was just, it's so random and it won't be for everybody, but it was for me. I liked it. Good time. Is this my indigo pick? I think it is. I think it's my indigo pick, and that's The Dream Manager by Matthew Kelly, which I'm giving 4.5 stars, which might seem high for what it is, but I don't know, I had a great time reading this. This book talks a lot about a leadership perspective that I believe in very strongly. And although I haven't used it in the same way in my life they did in this book, I think the essence is the same to what I really care about in leadership, which is twofold. The one, you're leading people, and you can't forget that they're people, and you cannot forget that they're humans, and that they have their own things, their own hearts, their own minds. That's important. And then 2, leadership as service. In this book, we talk a lot about the idea of loyalty to a company, and how if you show your employees that you are invested in what they care about, that they will be loyal to you. And in that way, it is about service. If you serve your employees well, they will serve you well. And that is something that I believe in very strongly. This is technically told as a parable, I guess. It's a very direct parable, if you will, because in it we're following this guy. He works at a company and turnover is like a huge problem there, and so they're trying to solve turnover. It's at a janitorial company. Instead of just assuming that what people want is more money, even though they know that they do, they want to know what the actual problem is. So they start a series of surveys to talk to their employees and get at the root of the problem. And they basically start implementing this dream manager system where they have their employees meet with a dream manager who helps them talk through their dreams and helps them make plans for fulfilling those dreams and stuff. It's a really simple idea, but I think it's a very powerful one. It's leading me to think about what my dreams are, like small or big. And again, it really aligns with the things that I care about in leadership and working with people. So I just really enjoyed my time reading this. For my purple book, I read A Small Zombie Problem by K.G. Campbell, which I'm giving 3.5 stars. I think young children would love this as long as they can get past the grossness of the zombie element at times. In this one, we're following August. He's lived in the same house his whole life. He's never been outside. Suddenly one day, he goes forth and ventures outside and encounters a small zombie problem. The illustrations in this are great, like so fun. The characters are just as quirky and weird as you'd want in a fun middle grade like this. And I did end up reading this around spooky season, so this was a fun, like, spoopy little time. And that's it. That's the whole rainbow from Roy all the way to G and through Biv. We have made it. And this was a really fun one. Like, I ended up reading so many fun and good books for this. I'm happy about it. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up and comment down below. Have you ever thought of arranging your books in color order, rainbow order, if you will? And subscribe for more reading, writing, and college lifestyle content. And until next time, bye humans, bye!